Please join me in welcoming Dr. Shahnovich.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm very honored to be your commencement speaker. If I were you sitting here, I'd be asking myself, why did I get this PhD or master's? Who is this guy, and what am I going to do next? Well, like Dean Luchan told me, I'm a 2004 graduate of BU Bioinformatics PhD program, and they asked me here to tell you that it's all going to be okay. I'm sure that I'm not the first to tell you that the world is changing right before our eyes. In fact, Dean Luchan just told you that before. The only thing that is constant is the ever-increasing pace of that transformation. The world around us will change more in the next 5 years than in the 20 before and in the 100 before that. Self-driving electric cars, privately built rockets, jetpacks, and walking robots are here, no longer the stuff of science fiction, but reality here and now. Seeing this change happen over the last 20 to 25 years, I can safely say that the most important thing I can tell you today is that much of the knowledge that you have so painstakingly acquired during your graduate studies at Boston University is already obsolete. But trust me, it's going to be okay. Technology is changing everything from the way we farm, to the way we communicate, to the way we travel. It's changing our thinking about our mortality, our morality, and even the way we conduct business, economy, and government. Not limited to just changing the way we live our lives, technology is changing the way we think. The axioms themselves on which we base our systems of thought are being challenged. But for you, that's actually a great thing. One of my all-time favorite books is G.E.B., Gödel, Escher, Bach, An Eternal Golden Braid. Gödel, who was an early 20th century logician, was studying completeness in mathematical systems. At age 25, he published a set of papers stating that if a logical or axiomatic formal system is consistent, it cannot be complete. Plainly speaking, he stated that as long as there's at least one axiom, one thing you can't prove but has to be taken for granted and is at the foundation of your system you cannot prove that your system that you build is true, even if it is self-consistent. Escher, whose work is currently on display at the MFA in Boston, you should go and see it, actually, it's great, was exploring art that beautifully morphed one shaped like a bird into another like a fish through self-similarity. Johann Sebastian Bach was, of course, an 18th century Baroque composer who, among other works, wrote beautifully self-similar fugues, which are contrapuntal compositions of musical phrases repeated over and over at different octaves. A subtle and beautiful expose on the rise of ordered models and pattern recognition from self-similarity. Hofstadter draws parallels between completely distinct professions and people that were born in 3 completely different centuries, unified by the respect of the eternal. I think my life so far has been that eternal braid, a pattern that is self-similar yet vastly different, and it turned out great. I came to this country as an 11-year-old in 1990. If you remember 4th grade, it was all about rules, figuring them out, breaking them, and not getting caught. Before I came, I was the #2 student in the class, excelled in math, and in general was laser-focused on being the best in a society which really valued being the best above all else. Everything changed when I joined Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School in the People's Republic of Cambridge across the river. My classmates, I see there are some Cambridge fanatics here. My classmates did not especially care how well I knew algebra or whether Paris was the capital of France or a town in Texas. I was not especially liked, had no friends, and didn't understand why nobody cared that I was the best math student in class. The next 10 years of my life are best characterized by the usual stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, and depression. I no longer knew the rules by which to lead my life, and it would take me another 20 years to figure them out. As a consequence of my very poor grades, the choice of college was rather limited, but I got very lucky that University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign took me in. I ended up taking quantum and statistical mechanics, organic chemistry, genetics, and computer science. Since I didn't take any prerequisites before taking those classes, I predictably didn't get very good grades, but I did learn a lot. I learned nothing specific, but I learned how, in general, people approach solving difficult problems in a variety of seemingly unrelated disciplines, like physics, biology, computer science, and philosophy. The subjects that fascinated me most were the ones where the solution to the problem was not intuitive, where your experience of the world would not help you, and in most cases would prevent you from figuring out the right answer. Disciplines like genetics, relativity theory, quantum mechanics, and the like. You can't use what you know about being a good citizen or even a human being to figure out an answer as to why there's a speed limit to photons traveling in space. The combination of what interested me and what I was good at is how I got to be you. The interface between natural science and computer science was at that time the budding field of bioinformatics. Bioinformatics was buoyed by the automation and digitization of traditionally analog biological experiments, combined with an increasing power of computers to analyze the massive explosion of experimental data. In fact, what was happening to biology 15 years ago is very similar to what is happening to society, business, marketing, and commerce now. But a little more on that a little bit later. After graduating with a PhD in bioinformatics in just 2.5 years, I became an assistant research professor with my own group of master's and PhD students, just like you. For the first time since coming to America as an 11-year-old, I achieved relative success, but something was missing. The problem was that while I was successful at solving the problems and publishing the results, I could not successfully predict which problems to solve. In business, this is usually known as market research. At the time, bioinformatics itself was undergoing a fundamental transformation of its own. Because bioinformaticians did not do experiments and generate their own data, bioinformatics was moving away from basic research into being a tool that helps wet lab biologists to interpret their experimental data. If you wanted to stay in academia, the most common way to fix the problem was to do your own experiments and generate your own data that you can then analyze using your own computational methods, which is what I did. The year was 2008, and after 2 years of trying to do experiments myself in a lab at Harvard, I decided that the world of shaking analog yeast at 6 o'clock in the morning was not for me. So I did the next logical thing. Much to the chagrin of my poor mother, I quit academia to start my own company. My mother's in the audience today. Hi, Mom. And I just wanted to say, Mom, it turned out okay. In my first foray into business, I made the most common rookie mistake. I chose to solve my own biggest problem and become my first customer. The problem that I was experiencing was that it took academia too long to pat me on the back and recognize me and the impact of my work. 3 years doing experiments, a year writing papers, and then another 4 waiting until someone else cites your work meant that close to a decade would pass until you could say that your work was impactful and important. And so the company I started was meant to solve that problem by allowing researchers to create their own publication space where feedback could be gathered at the speed of the internet. To make matters worse, what I learned as an academic, and I applied it to business. Success in academia is predicated on doing something new and convincing people that it's an important problem to solve. Clearly, the idea of revolutionizing the economics of science met those criteria. Excuse me. As it turns out, the rule for success in academia is completely the opposite of the foundation of success in business. In fact, if you think of the majority of successful businesses, very few of them are based on pioneering new ideas. Facebook was not the first social network, Google was not the first search engine, and Ford was not the inventor of the first automobile. During those challenging first couple of years in business, I learned the actual rules upon which successful businesses are built. Marketing, sales, customer service, and tenacity. I quickly relearned the lesson I first learned in 4th grade. If you don't know the axioms upon which the systems are built, you can't be successful in those systems. My first company was a beautiful science project, but a terrible business. After I closed that company, I came to my friend who was running PDFfiller and I said, here's some technology that I developed for my failed startup. I don't need it anymore, but maybe you can use it. At the time, PDFfiller was one person in a basement working on an application that was really just an electronic version of a typewriter. Luck and being at the right time and the right place played a big part of what happened next. Business was at the same stage of undergoing the same disruption that biology was experiencing a decade earlier when I started my career in bioinformatics. Marketing, sales, customer service that were up to the point analog and largely driven by the intuition and experience of their practitioners was being changed into data-driven quantitative endeavors. The same forces that changed biology 15 years earlier catalyzed this change in business. Digitization and computerization of customer behavior was now informing future business decisions. I've seen that transformation before and I was ready for it. So I took the knowledge learned from a decade in bioinformatics and I applied it to marketing and customer success in business. After it became clear that the application of bioinformatics to marketing and electronic typewriter would interestingly produce results, I joined PDFfiller full-time. This is where I tried to learn from all of my mistakes and failures. No longer would I use common sense to inform my actions. No longer would I believe in common wisdom. No longer I would test everything and approach business as I would any scientific problem via a series of experiments with no preconception of outcome. The scientific method applied to business created one of the most successful companies in Boston that I bet you've never heard of. Since I joined PDFfiller in 2012, it has grown from a simple electronic typewriter that worked on your computer to a complete document workflow solution used by hundreds of thousands of organizations as large as the government of Australia. Not all of them are as large as the government of Australia. PDFfiller employs 400 people and serves 10 million users every month. I'm here to tell you that if I could do it, so can you. What was the secret to PDFfiller's success? You are the practitioners of that secret. The secret is tens of thousands of experiments, testing each assumption from the color of a button to a product feature to where to find the next customer. Jeff Bezos, the CEO and founder of Amazon, likes to say that every day at Amazon is day one. I think what he means by that is no matter how big you are, no matter how much experience you have, you start every day knowing nothing and testing everything. What I want to tell you standing before you 15 years to the day after I sat where you are sitting now is that you know nothing, but can do anything. Do not hide behind the skills you've developed or the knowledge you've attained. Do not let anyone convince you that lack of experience is a disadvantage. With change being the only constant, it is an advantage that gives you the ability to adapt faster. Remember that when change is exponential, it doesn't matter where you start as long as you're always improving. Jack Welch, the famous CEO of GE, said if you don't have an unfair competitive advantage, don't compete. Well, you do have an unfair competitive advantage. It is not the knowledge that you've attained, but the system of thought that has delivered that knowledge to humanity over the last 3 centuries and will continue to do so at an ever-increasing pace in the next millennia. Use the tools that you've been given, the philosophy of the scientific method, to apply yourself to new and unexplored frontiers undergoing disruptive transformations. Those frontiers are where the most interesting and fulfilling discoveries happen and where you can make the most impactful contributions. You cannot predict tomorrow, but you can discover it. And nobody has a framework better than you to do it. Tell yourselves that you know nothing about the problem you're about to solve. Challenge your preconceived notion and your common sense. They're going to be wrong most of the time anyways. Most importantly, do not be afraid to break the rules. They're temporary anyways. And trust in yourselves. You're best positioned to be the leaders, innovators, and catalysts of tomorrow. Thank you. Congratulations.